Good afternoon. I'm Dick Miller, and I am here with Senator Jeff Smith. We had our first episode about a month ago, and we were talking here about having a name for this show, and we haven't come up with it. So I guess we're going to say, my thought was Friday with Jeff Smith, since we're recording this on Friday, but we'll come up with a name hopefully in time to come. So welcome, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks, Dick.
We're nice
Continuing
to see you.
conversation.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And there's all kinds of things going on. This is the 4th day of October that we're doing this show, and there's a lot going on in the news in the Washington D.C. It sounds like in the state of Wisconsin, which you spend a lot of time with. We hope to touch base on some of the things that are not going on or going on as we move ahead here.
Yeah.
I just wanted to share this with my thought with you and with the audience, that my feeling is the closer the government is to the people, the more transparency is demanded, and the more transparency there is. And you have as a goal, at least my interpretation is, you have as a goal to get out and meet with the people in your district and share your concerns and take questions and so forth. And this is, again, this is the opportunity to do some of that. Right?
This is one of those opportunities for sure. This is more, of course, us having conversation for people to listen to. When I'm out on the street, and as you know, I use my truck as a prop maybe, but a big sign that says stop and talk, for that very reason. We haven't been on the floor often enough. Only 6 days so far this year, 7 next week from when we're talking today. So by the time people see this, maybe 7 days out of this entire calendar year so far. That leaves me a lot of opportunity, I guess. I'll try to be positive about it. Opportunity to be here in my district, listening to what constituents' concerns are, and that's what I do as much as possible.
You know, it's just interesting you should mention, you said 7 days, and that's over a period of what time?
So over a period of, this is the 10th month of the year.
And 7 days you've had floor activity.
Yes, right.
So that means you're in the office or you're out and about, but you're not necessarily debating.
We aren't. Now, to be clear, most debate happens in committee. And when we're on the floor, by then, people usually have their mind made up, but we have a lot of floor speeches and things like that. But we're not even considering good pieces of legislation for political reasons. We have leadership. It's really come back to leadership. So leadership in the legislature, both in the Senate and the Assembly, have made these choices to not consider a lot of pieces of legislation that both sides have authored during this course of this year, and have debate like we should, and pass it on to the governor. That's the bottom line. Key is they're not ready to be passing laws onto the governor to sign yet.
So there doesn't appear to be a lot of effort on the part of both parties to find this common ground, to find perhaps some legislation that is needed, but not necessarily overly controversial.
Well, again, I would say it's a leadership issue. It really depends on them. There's not much the rest of us can do if they don't set up dates for us to get to have legislation passed. So you and I were talking earlier that I continue to talk about shared government versus split government, and we're operating under the illusion that we are split government. And maybe the illusion is we're shared, but I know the public, I know that I and many others believe in democracy, that means shared government. And I want us all to know, or to realize, we got to start talking more like that. We have to talk to each other like that this is a shared nation and a shared state and a shared community, and we need to have shared government and make sure that we are, in the end, coming up with solutions to whatever problems we have.
Well, it seems like nationally and perhaps statewide, we don't have that shared government. We have caucuses that perhaps each of them have priorities, and we'll talk about some of the priorities the Democratic caucus has here shortly. There doesn't seem to be much, there's not a joint sharing of commonality of try to deal with common goals or common concerns, which is unfortunate. We have so many.
We do.
I was just thinking, I was downstairs here in the courthouse a week and a half ago or thereabouts, and the need for infrastructure here in the county, and this is statewide, like highways, that was in order to kind of catch up to where we should be in this county. It was a very substantial amount of money that I don't think the board found.
Right.
And this is statewide, I think, infrastructure.
It is. Just this past week, Representative Petrick and myself represent Prescott, and we were called by the city council. We want to meet with you. So their whole meeting was just about sitting around the table discussion, telling us the things that they're falling short on providing, including EMS service. They can't reach their budget limit for that. Of course, the roads, repairing the roads, the water, there's a water issue there. And of course, actually, Medicaid is a big cost for government as well as private individuals. Yes,
yeah. There are a lot of these expenses that have really gone quite high, and the opiate issue, of course, has affected all of the counties and the state.
Yeah. It's really stretched their budgets. I know the counties are stretched because of the social services that the health and human services are going beyond their budgets. I know in the northern part of this district where I live, that's certainly the case.
Yes, well, so many more kids that are temporarily out of their homes and have to be provided for in terms of day-to-day care as well as health care and so forth. Yeah, very big expenses, very big expense. So it's safe to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, it's safe to say that due to the fact that the parties haven't met more than just 6 or 7 days together, unless you happen to have a relationship with individuals of the other party where you sit down and over a cup of coffee and debate the issues at hand, there may not be a lot of discussion to find those common areas.
So, and that's true. 10 years ago when I was in the legislature my first time around, there was a lot more of that happening, and it was a lot easier. I see a lot has happened in the past 8 years that have changed that, and I feel it's my responsibility to try to rebuild that as much as possible, build relationships, be adult. We can disagree. In fact, we can know that we're going to always disagree and still be friendly, cordial, and respectful, and sit down and figure out if there's things that we can come together on. And there are things, we hear it all, we've heard through last year in campaign, and we need to be sure and express that we follow through with some of these things, that broadband expansion into rural Wisconsin is critical. I can connect that to health care, I can connect that to education, I connect that to clean water. All of the other issues I can connect to something as simple as broadband expansion, which both sides have been talking about for a long time. CWD, chronic wasting disease, is critical to our part of the state. It's moving up here. The southern third of the state is already considered a dead zone as far as deer are concerned. Why are we waiting? I know I've talked to both conservatives and liberals alike, hunters, who are really angry and frustrated that we spent 8 years or more sitting on this and doing nothing and just waiting for it to go away on its own, it seems like. So there's legislation that I have introduced along with others recently, and we're hoping we can really get the attention of both sides that this is one of these things that we can work together. Once we do things together on issues like those, Maybe that will build towards getting some really big things done.
Now, just for my information, in your bill, are there some specifics that are included to actually deal with trying to prevent CWD?
Sure, absolutely. Key things about chronic wasting disease, and I'm going to plead with people right now. Bow hunting we're in the midst of bow hunting now. A month from now, we'll be talking about gun hunting. Test your deer. It's voluntary, but test your deer. We tried. Actually, I'm in a hot spot where I live, and 6 townships around me, including mine, had the CPACs there had determined they wanted to have a mandatory testing. Just 2 days ago, before we're speaking here today, unfortunately the Natural Resources Board overrode their decision and are not going to have mandatory testing, but voluntary testing. Kiosks will be available for people to drop off the key components of their deer, and with instructions, the whole works, and they'll find out whether their deer is infected. You should want to know if your deer is infected. This is so critical, but it's also critical for us to know where it's happening and how it's spreading to be able to do anything about it. The other critical thing is disposal. When you have harvested a deer, I know as a hunter in the past that I did all of my own butchering and all of that, and then what did you do with the carcass? It was always traditional. You just put it back out in the woods for the wildlife to take care of. We can't do that anymore. Not with CWD. CWD prions are in the remains, in the bones, in everything. They degenerate right into the ground and remain there, and we know for years they can remain there. Which end up in the roots and the plants that the deer eat, and that's one of the ways it spreads. It's a scary thing, and so I can plead with hunters to use the disposal sites that it's one of the bills, so getting around to the bills. We would like to encourage testing. The other bill, though, is actually disposal site. We have a grant program. We just had a hearing on that. This actually is a really good bipartisan effort. So we actually have money available, and giving each county the money to have 6 dumpsters around the counties. Each county gets 6, and then dispose of those carcasses in these lined dumpsters. That would really be a key thing, and picking up the deer on the roadsides and putting them in the dumpsters as well. We've got to get them off the ground, and we can start changing this terrible spread of this disease.
Yeah, and I guess I'm admitting my ignorance, but I know there are human diseases that perhaps have similar traits.
Yes, it's. I'm going to butcher this, but I think it's called Creutzfeldt-Jacobson disease. And it can't be diagnosed. It's fatal. People die from it. They only discover it when they do an autopsy. So it's really been a hard thing to connect whether or not it's the same thing, if it's passed from an animal to a human being. We don't know the science yet.
We don't know if it's jumped or not.
We don't know that.
Yeah, so the unknown can be frightening.
And I'm not being over dramatic here. I do want people to be frightened, though, and I want them to take that precaution and have their deer tested before they
eat it.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good idea.
It's free.
Yeah.
By the way.
I just coming up here today, I passed a deer in the ditch, and
Me too.
And I know the problem has been historically is finding consistent coverage for picking up these animals and disposing of them properly.
Yeah, it was several years ago, the state gave up or relinquished the duty and passed it on to the counties. Again, now we have a county cost, and they've been using private contractors as well as some counties also contract that out.
So oftentimes the animal deteriorates substantially before it's picked up. And
sometimes it's not picked up. I've only just recently realized this. Removal of deer carcasses from the road only means from the road. Sometimes the contractors, and maybe most often, all they do is get it off into the ditch. That's considered removing it from the road. We can't do that. I mean, we've got to insist that they actually do pick up these deer carcasses and bring them to those disposal sites.
Well, one would think that that issue dealing with that particular disease, that the parties would come together and see common ground.
I think we are finally.
Good.
So the bills that we've introduced, that the Republicans have been on board with, we had a hearing on one already, so we're hoping for more. But it's also an economic issue in this part of the state. Buffalo County relies heavily on deer hunting. It is the epicenter worldwide of white-tailed deer and trophy deer. So it's really important to western Wisconsin that we get this under control.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you look at the number of deer harvested every year, and this area has substantial numbers, so it is a big thing. Moving on, are there some other areas that you see as where there may be some commonalities?
Well, again, like I mentioned, broadband. I've heard it from both sides of the aisle during the campaign season. I keep hearing it that, broadband expansion. Well, the governor introduced steps, in the budget, including $75 million, I think, was in his original budget, but we ended up getting $48 million, I believe, in the final product. That's the most money ever invested by the state into broadband grants before. That's a good start. We also wanted to define it, but that was taken out of the budget, where we should define it as 25/3. That means 25 download and 3 upload speed. We need that definition so that people don't just take that money that we're handing out and not actually provide what we consider to be high-speed
It sets a standard then.
Yeah, it's got to set a standard, right? So there's just so many other things. It frustrates me that that we're not putting a little more pressure on the providers, the private providers, maybe, and encouraging maybe our co-ops, electric co-ops, who already have that client base, the members that they have, and are serving rural Wisconsin. We should be doing all we can to help them provide it if we can as well. That's just my personal thinking on that. I live in a rural and use a rural co-op, and I think it would be important for this. But when I speak to hospitals, just this week I spoke to hospital administrators at their annual meeting, and they want to talk telehealth. This is the new movement in health, where patients can, in their own home, face-to-face, through telehealth, talk to their doctors. And also clinics in rural critical care hospitals can actually have more contact with people or doctors around the world, experts in certain issues, and save lives. But then I always say, but we don't have broadband where we live. We don't have the speeds. We don't have the access, especially in the homes, in businesses in rural Wisconsin. So that alone is a critical element that may be a tipping point where we get the health industry involved, we get schools involved, we get the communities involved, that we want to be able to have that ability to access health care.
Well, as you well know, probably Tri-County Communication initially started in this, about a 5-school area, and they, I think, are back into providing additional classroom experiences for people in the various schools. Obviously, if you have a specialty area someone is teaching in say, Arcadia, and you don't have that in Blair Taylor, there is a sharing. So that's great. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, in the medical field, you mentioned visits with a doctor, but there is even more testing that can be done via the internet.
Yes, there is.
Without being
surprisingly
present.
Yeah, it's hard for us to imagine, but it's true.
to
Because
do
they want to provide, actually, honestly, they want to provide your own ability to test your own blood pressure right through your computer, things like that. I mean, we all know now, I mean, it's amazing. They take your temperature by wiping your forehead with a thing, and it's, wow.
a wand, basically.
Yeah, it's crazy. But you'd be able to do that at home and get your answers over the internet.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you mentioned that, and I'm involved with a food pantry in Blair, and we have a little device that we just point it at frozen food, and we can tell the temperature. We don't even touch it. You know?
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, we don't know how it works, but it must work.
Those are a couple of really good examples of areas where we should be able to come together as political spectrums and say, hey, we can get these things done. We can. They're right there in front of us.
Yeah, it's really not a demarcation due to policy differences.
And once we learn to work together, then maybe we can truly find shared government as it should be.
Well, now, you were telling me that the Democratic Party in the Senate has discussed priorities for the upcoming several months.
Yep.
Do you want to?
So by the time our audience sees this today, we'll probably have rolled that out. We will be having press conferences around the state. I was trying to look on my phone, and it just doesn't make sense for me to do that right now and try to read a lot of this stuff. But we're going to emphasize some of the things that are no surprises. We still think the state needs to accept Medicaid expansion money, which is our money that we pay into Medicaid at the federal level. The law says it should come back to Wisconsin. We can provide opportunity for 80, I can't remember the number, 80-some thousand more people to get access health care that are not accessing it now. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. $300 million per year we can bring back to Wisconsin just through that, but if we leverage it right, it actually ends up being $1.6 billion, something like that. So, or 1.2 billion, I can't remember the number either, but that's one of the priorities. Everybody's probably tired of hearing that from us, but we're going to keep pounding that because it's so important. That's a big number. Of course, clean water. We want our family farms to succeed as well, though, and give them all the farm practices ability through UW Extension and other practices. We are introducing some things that Dairy 2.0 Task Force has recommended. We're going to start recommending that. Another opportunity, by the way, for some real bipartisan legislation, because we're at critical mass here. I just visited, I was in Madison this week for 2 days and went to the Dairy Expo, the International Dairy Expo held in Madison. By the way, when I went there and saw tens of thousands of people in one place in Madison, I realized how important the whole world sees us as the center of dairy still to this day. So that was impressive, and we should be proud of that. But I heard some amazing things being said by presenters that should really help farmers if they're paying. People were taking notes. These were crowded seminars. People were taking notes and hopefully taking that home with them. But it was really disappointing to hear our federal ag secretary on Tuesday make the comment as he visited this, coming from Washington, D.C., Sonny Perdue, that if you're small, you have to go. That's just not true. I sat last night at a Farm Bureau meeting with somebody who milks 42 cows. That's as small as you can get, but still making it. Knows what he's doing. There's no reason why someone can't milk 200 to 400 cows and have a successful dairy business going. We have to help them make that happen, though.
Well, and I think, obviously, this is true with any business, small business or large business, that the more cows one milks, the more labor is required. And so and labor is a crucial need, but it's a difficult one in that industry, to find qualified people who are willing to work those hours and so forth.
Yeah.
So it's that's an interesting area. I have family that's in the dairy industry in Iowa, and getting bigger, you know, we've been told that getting bigger is better and necessary. And what you're saying is there are examples that it is not.
Not only that, but the seminar I went to about profitability, dairy profitability, the presenter in his takeaways, one of the lines was, a larger herd does not mean greater profitability.
Right.
And he demonstrated that in more detail in his presentation. But wow, that was just the opposite of what we heard from the Ag Secretary the day before, which really tells you a lot about the out-of-touch Washington, D.C. and politicians who are pushing, you know, the huge corporate message instead of helping our family farms.
And what's so interesting is, I think, and I may be mistaken, I think we had a Ag Secretary by the name of Benson back in the 50s that was saying almost the same thing.
Yeah.
So, and that was, yeah, bigger isn't always better. I want to touch on something real quick, and maybe, Jeff, you can tell us. Jeff puts out a newsletter, and I'm not sure how often you do it, but you hit on topics that are of current concern and interest by you and your office, I think. I get mine on email, but is this available in any of the local publications?
So hopefully, we always send it to the local publications. I hope they print them. I don't always know if they do. We do this once a week. I send it out every Monday to the publications and every Wednesday publicly to persons like yourself. So if people want to sign up for that, they should go to our website. You can go through the state legislature's website to get to our website. Okay. And we'd love to be able to add you to our list and send you our weekly column.
Okay, we have to wind it up. Appreciate you being here, Jeff, today, and
thanks, Dick.
We'll come up with a name
Another
for this show.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. Thanks. Now. Goodbye, all.